Okay, welcome back to part 2 of my pregnancy and birth story. My name is Annalie. I had my baby girl on November 20th, 2022 at 29 weeks due to preterm premature rupture of membranes. And she was born via C-section, and we were in the NICU for 57 days, and now she's home with me while I film this. She might start waking up, so you might hear her. If you want to watch part 1 of my video, I'll see if I can link it down somewhere. I don't know. This is like my first time on YouTube, but you can also just start here. And the reason why I wanted to share my birth story specifically is because I feel like there are a ton of happy birth stories, like with all of the amazing, like natural skin to skin, low intervention, and that's what I had really wanted going into my pregnancy. But that's not what I got. And when I was going through complications and wondering how things would be, I felt like I just couldn't find a lot of stories that I could relate to. And so this is not going to be like the most happy, fun, get excited about birth story there is, but it's also real. And this is something that a lot of people go through. And birth trauma is something that I don't think is talked about enough, because there's kind of this idea of if you've experienced birth trauma, then you need to be quiet about it and not talk about your story because you don't want to scare other people or other moms who might have a baby. And while I think that's somewhat true, I also think it is not a good way to approach women who have experienced the types of things that a lot of NICU moms or birth trauma survivors have experienced. Lots of times those two things go hand in hand. So this is like my intro to my story. So we started out when my water broke at 28 weeks, and I was in the hospital for about a week. She was breech, and so I was not a candidate for a vaginal delivery, and I kept going into labor. I'd been in labor for about 2 days on and off. Her foot started escaping into the birth canal, and because of that, my provider, my OB, and I decided that it was time. There was more risks to keeping her inside of me at that point than taking her out, because otherwise, if she hadn't been escaping and she'd been head down, we could have waited until 34 weeks before an induction. So as soon as he said it was time to move forward, I was instantly terrified. Like, I'd been scared all day. I had kind of had this feeling earlier in the day that she was coming, like that night. And it was, so I took my last bump picture, I was crying. That was one of the things that I think you miss out on with having such an early birth, is like I was always excited to have the big bump, and I never really got that. But I do have a healthy baby next to me now, so I'm really thankful for that. So going into birth, like I mentioned earlier, I really wanted like a natural, all birth is like natural, it's just part of life, but I really wanted an unmedicated, low intervention birth, and I was planning to do it in a small hospital with some midwives. I ended up being in pretty much the exact opposite of that situation, and I'm so thankful that I was, because my daughter would probably not be here today without that. But I was scared of getting an epidural. So that's probably the opposite of a lot of other people who like are scared of not getting an epidural or like it failing, but I just was not a fan of the whole process. So I started kind of panicking when the anesthesiologist was coming in, because I was in a ton of pain at this point because I was in labor, I was contracting, and I was super stressed. And it wasn't like I was like, could be happy about, I'm contracting, every contraction is gonna bring me closer to my baby. It was like, I want this baby to stay inside of me more than anything, and I'm in pain, and I'm trying to get through this. So I did opt for an epidural, also because I was going in for a C-section. It was just kind of like a given. I started panicking, hyperventilating, like really, really scared about everything. And I had a nurse who'd been with me a few times, and we'd had a lot of good conversations. She sat down in front of me and she said, "Kate, I trust this anesthesiologist so much. I specifically requested him to be the one who helped my husband with the surgery a few months ago. He knows what he's doing. He's amazing. You're gonna be okay. Like, he's gonna make sure that you're taken care of." And so that helped me kind of get into like at least a somewhat like coherent headspace, where I was able to like sit up, you lean over the bed, you hunch forward. I was freaking out, but in my mind, but in my head, I was just trying to like outside, I was trying to like breathe and relax. I was like holding my husband's hand, looking at him in the eyes, and he was talking to me. I just wanted to like run out of the room, honestly. I was so scared. But I felt the like epidural go in, which honestly wasn't as bad as I thought, like getting it. But once I had it, I hated it so much because your legs start to tingle and go numb and you just feel like dead from like the waist down, which maybe is preferable for like a lot of people, but for me it was just like I felt like trapped. And so they like laid me back on the bed. My legs were still kind of like going in and out. I remember I had like fuzzy socks on and they didn't take them off. They're like, you can just leave those on, it's fine. And then they wheeled me back into the OR with my husband, and at the whole time they're like, hey, it might take a little bit for you to get numb, but like keep going. And I remember like as I was wheeling back to the OR, I was just like so terrified, more scared than I've ever been in my life. And then you go from like kind of like a dimly lit hospital room that's like kind of quiet and private into the OR, which is just like stark white. There's people everywhere because the NICU team was there, the anesthesiologist team was there, my OB was there with all the nurses who were going to do the C-section. And my legs were like not totally numb yet, but they're still tingling, but like I could not move them. And so they brought like the gurney, whatever, hospital bed up, and they moved me onto it. And then things that I didn't know going into the C-section is they have you like put your arms out to the side like this, and then they put this like warming air blanket over them. And so when you just like want to be like curled up and like, you know, safe, you have to just be in this like really vulnerable position like this. My husband was sitting right here, the anesthesiologist was right here, and they put the curtain up. And then my OB started like poking me, I thought, and he was like, "Okay, do you feel this?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Does it hurt?" "Yeah." "Okay, what side?" "Right side." "Left side?" "Right side." And he went back and forth, kept asking me, "Do you feel this? Do you feel this?" And I was like, "Yes, yes, 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 yes." It like feels like a pinch. I feel that. I feel that. I feel that. And so it was taking me like a while to get numb, and so that was kind of scary. And I didn't know at the time, but I thought he just had like tweezers or something. But apparently he was using the scalpel and like starting on the incision. So my husband told me that after, and I'm really glad I didn't know that while it was happening. But the anesthesiologist was like giving me like a little bit stronger stuff because I was feeling it. And then once they decided that I was like numb enough, like I wasn't in pain, they started going. And for someone, if you've had a C-section, you know that feeling of being like cut into is like, it's the most, I don't know, icky. It's just it just feels wrong because you can just feel them kind of getting deeper and deeper like inside of your body. And it didn't necessarily hurt at that point, but it was not comfortable. It was like pressure. It was weird. And so that whole process was like pretty quick. It was probably 10-15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes from the time that the anesthesiologist like started the epidural to like when they were like cutting into me. So that was crazy. And then they cut in, they had a hard time getting her out, I guess, my husband told me, but she kind of got stuck. But then they pulled her out and she was doing really well. So being born at 29 weeks, it's kind of expected that they're going to need resuscitation, they're going to need to be intubated, all of those things. But I truly believe that because my medical team leading up to it was so focused and so careful that we got both rounds of betamethasone steroids well before she came, that is what made it so that when she came out, she was able to breathe on her own, and which is unreal. And because she was doing so well, I heard the doctors say, "Okay, we're gonna do 1 minute of delayed cord clamping." And I was kind of laying there like just totally bewildered, didn't know what was going on, but I heard that. I didn't hear her cry or anything. I think she was pretty quiet when she came out. But they waited, and then suddenly she was gone. And this is, I think, one of the biggest regrets that I have from my whole delivery process is that I didn't get to see her when she was born. She was born at 11:33 p.m. and I didn't see her till like a couple hours later. But I didn't know that I needed to ask to see her, and so I didn't. But I feel like my providers could have definitely like held her up over the curtain since she was doing good enough to wait on the cord clamping. So I don't know what to say about that, but that's just something that happened. So then that whole process, I was like so unbelievably terrified, like more scared than I've ever been in my life by like a factor of 10. or more. Like, it was such a horrifying experience just being in the OR, not knowing what's gonna happen, being worried about my baby. Is she okay? Am I gonna be okay? Like, it's a major surgery. And I think that's sometimes swept under the rug too. It's like, oh, you had a C-section, you had the easy way out. No. Even someone who has like a scheduled planned C-section at like 40 weeks, it's not the easy way out. Whatever way you have of bringing your child to the earth, it's hard, and moms go through a lot to get their babies here. But then, so she was gone, and my husband like went out to the room next door with the NICU team to kind of take care of her, and then they started working on my placenta, and that was excruciating. Like, the pressure, they have to like push on your uterus to like get it to kind of come off, right? And then yank on the other side. And I didn't see what was happening, but I could feel it was just not right. And so I started kind of like moaning, and like, I don't even know what sounds I was making. I probably sounded like a dying elk, because I don't know how loud, how soft. I think my husband said it was pretty loud. But I was like on the table, just like so much pain. And so the anesthesiologist kept pushing more and more stuff, I think. And then eventually I was so stressed that like sometimes when I get stressed, like my stomach acid kind of freaks out. And they had given me something to like lower my stomach acid because I was having surgery, but it obviously like didn't quite work. And so I felt like my like whole stomach, like diaphragm area was just on fire. I was in the most pain I've ever been in my life. Like, and I was, on top of that, I was still terrified, because also like my worst fears were coming true, because I was in so much pain and I didn't know. My husband had come back in and kind of like shown me like videos and pictures of her from the next room over, and so I'd seen her and I knew that she was okay, and so that was good. But like, I was not really in a place to like process that super well. So I was just here laying in tons and tons of pain, and then the next thing I knew, I opened my eyes and I was back in the L&D room, and my parents were in front of me. And that like transition was like so jarring and confusing. And I found out after that what had happened was, because I was clearly in so much pain, the anesthesiologist ended up pushing fentanyl and morphine through my line, and then I passed out. And I honestly feel like passing out was just a tender mercy from God, because I was so far beyond what I had the ability to like handle. And when my husband had come back into the room, like I was like, white as a sheet, just laying there. Like, I probably just looked ghostly, honestly. And he was like, hey, like, I think she's passed out. Like, she's like gone. And the anesthesiologist was like, no, she's just a little sleepy. And then like hit my face and was like, oh no, she did pass out. Okay. So they like weren't planning on me going under during the surgery, and then I did. But when I came to, luckily I wasn't feeling anything. The drugs worked their magic at that point. I was still like trapped in bed, but my parents were there. They were like, hey, like, because we'd kind of moved into the hospital in the whole week before she was born. But they were like gathering stuff up. And then because I was awake, then they took me back and they wheeled my entire bed across the hall. It was on the same floor as the NICU. So they wheeled me back, and then I was able to see her for the first time. It was probably around like 1 or 2 a.m. And like, as horrible as the experience of getting her here was, and how difficult it was, the moment that I saw her, I knew that it was all worth it, and I would do every single thing again, because she was so beautiful and she was so tiny. She was only 2 pounds and 2 ounces when she was born. Now when I'm filming this 2 months later, she's 6 pounds 2 ounces, so that's pretty amazing. But like, when I saw her for the first time, it was just this overwhelming feeling of love, and I knew that whatever she needed, I could do it for her. And so like throughout that whole night, I had the nurses like helped me figure out how to pump, because that's something that you have to start doing right away. And I feel like I could have had a little bit better support in that, because it was like 3 a.m. and they were like, hey, put these suckers on, like hold them here, and then you're gonna have to like change the settings with your hand. And then they like walked out, and my husband was asleep. And so I was just like, and I did that like 2 or 3 times during that night. I hardly remember. I just remember that happened. But I just woke up and I just did it. And even though I just gone through major surgery and like should have just been like totally wiped out, because I knew I was doing that for her, I was able to do it. And so that was like pretty amazing. And obviously there's like a whole another section of this story that I could get into another time about our NICU stay, but like the biggest takeaway that I want people to get from this video is that like it's worth it, and you are strong enough. You are the exact mom that your baby needs. I'm so thankful that we have the medical resources that we do now, because without it, like my baby would not be here. And if I experience future complications, like I may have never been able to have a baby if I lived like 50 years ago, or maybe more than that. But like I'm just so thankful for the teams, that the medical team that took such good care of me. I'm so thankful for my husband. I didn't really mention him that much during the video, but like I could not have done any of it without him. He is my rock. He's my everything. And now our little baby is home with us, and even now he's just still supporting me so much through it. But if you are going through something similar and you're kind of uncertain about like what's gonna happen, I mean, you never know, but all you can do is have faith that, and like whatever it is that you have faith in, whether that's God or just your medical team or hope or whatever, but having faith and hope for the future and trusting yourself to be the mom that your baby needs is the best thing that you can do. And I know that that's something that like can make a huge difference. So I hope that this was helpful for you guys or whoever's watching this. And I know that this is a lot. So when you're going through this type of thing, you feel so alone. So if anyone does need help, if you feel like you are isolated and you just want to talk to someone who gets it, feel free to like drop a comment, or you can also reach out to me on Instagram. It's just annalee.fuller. And honestly, that's been one of the things that's helped me the most getting through this, is just talking about it with people who get it. So hopefully that's something that's helpful for you as well. And I'm always there. I am more than happy to talk to any mom who's going through something hard with their baby, and or like NICU, early birth, even traumatic birth, C-sections. It's hard and you don't really get it until you've been there. But yeah, okay, so that's the end of my video. I don't really know else how to wrap it up, but yeah, thanks for watching.